than we think, because statistically the local never wins. Every time we go with a competition to somewhere where there's a local superstar that is born and bred there, everybody thinks, but he's going to win because he knows the whole area, and he never wins. So never trust the local. It's more true than you think. And the reason why he never wins is that he knows that it doesn't work there, and it never works there, and he has all these accumulated taboos that are just bullshit, basically. And as soon as some complete foreigner, unknown to the site, shows up and looks at it and analyzes it, subconsciously, of course, because you can't do that consciously, he can see that it's going to work there, and it's going to work there, and it's much more efficient than going that long way around that's based on some myth that was originating in the 90s when people had paragliders that were like free-flying machines, and they couldn't get up at that spot. But nowadays it's easy to get up at that spot, but the local guy still doesn't go there because everybody knows that if you go there you sink out. And then I come, I've never been there before, and I go straight into that spot and ping out of there like a champagne cork. And the local is just staring and saying, but it never works there. And so obviously we must be careful with the advice we give in a sport where you can hurt yourself a lot. And I'm not going to say that the local is never right, because there are things that the local knows that we don't know. But on the other hand, once we have the top certification level, it's called Parapro 5 in Denmark, I'm not sure, it's 3 or something in Sweden, isn't it? Once we have that, it says, at least in the Parapro, that we should be able to single-handedly assess conditions at new flying sites without any input from other pilots. And we should grab that and actually listen to it or read it and believe it and then just do it. The one exception I have experienced from that was in Iran. I was in Iran a couple of years ago to visit the UP distributor there, and I just could not work out what was happening with the site. I had no idea what was going on there. And I was there for a week and I never worked out what was going on with the site, but I still got a lot more flying done than the locals did. I just had some quite funny experiences doing it that maybe they wouldn't have appreciated. So I couldn't work that side out, but otherwise I've never been to a site that I couldn't just stand on launch and go, yeah, that's how it's going to work, that's how, and then it works. So you should do the same. Trust in your own judgment and listen to what they say, but don't take it too seriously. Believe in yourself, that's the main point here. Yeah, so when I finally started actually having some results, as I was saying there, it was because of a conscious decision to start being much more positive. And how did I work that out? Well, I was flying a lot in the beginning of my flying career with a local from this town called Peter Brinkeby. And many of you have probably met him in the past. I know that Nicholas hasn't. And I'm still in touch with him a few times now and again. He's running a bakery in outside of Guadalquivir in
Mexico.
Yeah, somewhere in western Mexico, and he's having fun doing that. And he sometimes comes back to Göteborg and does clinics, I think. He was here last summer playing with Äventyr Center, I think.
He'll be back.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. Anyway, so I used to come to Peter and say, so why did you do that? And what did you do? And yeah, I thought it was going to be better further on. And then it was. And that's not a very solid piece of advice, obviously. It's not something that you can take and use at face value, because but the essence of it is that he was thinking positive about the day. It happened particularly in a competition in Brazil many years ago, where we had as usual in Valadares, where we used to fly a lot, we had very weak conditions. We had 1 meter thermals, and we were just thermaling in 1 meter thermals all over the day, just going, round and round in circles. It gets very boring. And I got to go, and Peter had been there for an hour already. And I said, how did you do that? There were practically no thermals around. And he said, I had 6 meter thermals all the way. And I didn't meet any of these 6 meter thermals at all on my flight, but he only met 6 meter thermals. And it started to dawn on me that your mindset was going to have a lot of influence on what kind of day you were going to have, because Peter always thought that it was going to be better further on, and then it was. And that was one of the first little lessons that I got. The thing was that when I showed up at competitions and looked around at all the people that I knew so well, because I'd been flying with them for years already, I could see that there were maybe 50 or 40 pilots with skills that meant that they could win. They had the physical glider skills and the meteorological skills and anything they needed to win. Maybe 40 or 50 pilots could do that, but only 5 or 10 were actually winning. So what separates the first 40 from the last 5 or 10? It's basically this little checklist that we had just recently. It's first, they think they can, they're having more fun, and they like this intuition thing. And that's what I learned, and that's what I tried to copy. And the more I copied it, the better everything became, and the better life even became, because I was having more fun, I was enjoying myself more, I was being better company to those people around me, and that meant that I was having even more fun. So what happens is, if you're negative, then people shun you, and you get confirmed in that life sucks, because you're all alone and nobody loves you, and it's all miserable. Whereas if you're positive and just a bunch of energy and smiling all the time, then people come to you, they gravitate towards you, and they reinforce you in this life view that life is great, because it suddenly becomes great, and then it becomes greater all the time, and it's actually a self-feeding spiral that is just basically a good thing to be part of. And it's difficult for people who aren't born to be like that. It's really hard, and I still quite recently need to just stop up and say, hey, you're doing it again, stop, just be positive, enjoy, have fun. And then obviously you can pull yourself up again. But I guess depressions happen when you can't really pull yourself up again, and then you might need a depression. I haven't been there, fortunately. So, but the message I'm trying to get across is, the more fun you have, the more fun you'll have. And that goes for paragliding as well. The more you're enjoying every day out flying, the better tomorrow is going to be, because you learn more today that can make your tomorrow better. And that becomes pretty important, because if you're having a horrible flight and you're not enjoying yourself at all, then you go down and land. And then you've only flown for 20 minutes that day, and you haven't actually added much skills to your weaponry of skills that day. Whereas if you're having fun, then you stay up there and you keep going, you keep pushing, you keep learning, and you get a 5-hour flight and you've flown 200 kilometers and you've learned masses about paragliding, about meteorology, about glider handling, about all sorts of things that the guy who landed after 20 minutes didn't learn. And that means that tomorrow you're going to have a much better day than him, and the day after much better, and it just keeps accumulating. So what, now, I'm not going to pretend in front of you guys here that I'm not scared sometimes, because I get scared too. I think I do it because I get scared, because if I'm doing something that doesn't scare me, I lose interest very quickly. But not all people are like that, and not all people should be like that, because that's pretty stupid. But so I get scared too in the end, and that's important. I've actually I've realized over time that we don't talk about that much in paragliding. It's not very common to speak about what scares us and when we're scared and that sort of thing and what we do about it, because most people, as soon as they land, they forget that they were scared, and the only thing they think about is to get up again, and then they get to launch, and then maybe when they're standing on launch, then they realize, hey, it was pretty scary last time. And that's the wrong time to realize it again, because then you get tense, obviously, and then you're not performing so well when you're standing on launch as you could have been if you were relaxed and looking forward to a flight. So it's not very productive to forget about what scared you as soon as you land, only to remember it again when you're standing on launch. It's much better to do it the other way around, to remember it while you have it in recent history in your mind, and then forget about it when you're taking off again. That's going to work much better for you. So what can you do if you're scared, basically? Any input? Any techniques from you guys? What to do? It's turbulent, I'm scared, what should I do?
Have a sip of the water.
It's good.
Works for me.
Yeah, that's good. It takes your mind off what you're scared about, it puts it on something else. And the good thing about, if you will allow me to analyze a little bit about it, is that your brain is funny in that as long as your brain thinks, hey, he's scared, we're scared, then it gets more scared, because it feeds itself with this tension. But if you break that cycle and say, I'm going to have a sip of water, then the brain goes, hey, he's having a sip of water, everything must be okay, because otherwise he wouldn't be drinking water. And then it just winds down again. Whereas the opposite, it winds up all the time. And the first thing that happens when we get scared is, I have one of those harnesses where we lie flat on our backs and just bend our neck forward and try to look between our toes. And the first thing that happens when I get scared is, I sit up like this. And then I get really tense here. In the old days it would feel really hard, it doesn't really feel that hard anymore. and then I sit up like this, and I realized then, because I've been doing it for so long, hey, you must be scared because you're sitting up in the harness. Many people don't even realize it because they haven't been doing it for so long, and they're not really alert to the signals that the body is sending. In this competition that I was flying in Australia a couple of months ago, we had a girl on our team that was quite a new paraglider girl, and she came on the radio and she went, and then I went on the radio and said, hey, Nicole, I think you're a little bit tense there. What do you mean I'm tense? I'm not tense. but Nicole, you do sound quite tense, I must say. And she came back and she didn't even realize that she was super tense. And that's the first step, obviously. You need to be able to realize that you're tense in order to be able to do something about it. So I tried to teach her a little bit about how to feel that she was getting tense, but she thought, obviously, because she hadn't been flying for so long, she thought that sitting up like this with her stomach muscles completely in a knot was totally normal paragliding. That's just how paragliding is. And it shouldn't be. So try to remember that the next time you're flying, if you're always like that, then you could become a much better pilot already by just learning to relax a little bit more and become more fluid in your motions. Because it's all about being fluid here. And if you're sitting like this, totally tense everywhere, then you cannot be fluid. Then it's going to be robot movements, and that doesn't work for a paraglider. Paragliders don't understand that. They understand fluid movements. And that's why you want to be relaxed when you're doing it. So, what do? I've just realized now I'm tense, I'm scared. First thing I need to do is I need to breathe. I don't fly with water, that would work as well, or getting a candy bar out or whatever. But for me, what just works is I need to breathe. And anyone who's been into anything with the body knows that if we start breathing with the whole of the diaphragm here, then we relax more. And the funny thing about that is we cheat the brain again. The brain thinks, hey, we're breathing normally again, so it must be okay. Everything must be fine. So it feeds itself again. It's this self-feeding loop. And then the stomach muscles start to relax. I can lean back into the seat again, into the harness, and then I become fluent in my movements again. And what was scary before is suddenly not so scary anymore, because now I'm actually in control of the wing. Before I wasn't in control of the wing because I was too tense and my movements were too erratic and too hard. But when I relax and I lean back, then I'm in control of the wing again, and then it isn't actually so scary anymore. And the funny thing, of course, is that I think most pilots have tried to land and go up to the next guy in the field and say, wow, that was horrible up there. And he goes, what? And then the day after, we land and the guy comes over to us and he says, wow, that was horrible up there. And you go, what? And that means, obviously, that it is psychological, whether it's horrible up there or not. There are days that are just horrible, period. But most of the time when it feels like it's horrible up there, it's just because the mind isn't really into it today. And if we realize that, then we can make the mind into it, then we can get the most out of that day as well. And that's what we want to do. So the first one was to breathe a little bit. Basically anything that makes the brain believe that everything is okay will work. And one trick that I've heard used, some of you may have heard of Louise Crandall, and she used that quite a lot. If she got scared, let go of the brakes and start taking pictures. It sounds funny, but it works, because it gets your brain off thinking that it's really scary. And if your, let's say, if your conscious mind doesn't agree with it being as okay as that, you could just put both toggles in one hand and take pictures with the other, and then be halfway there. As soon as you start doing something completely different to just surviving, then the brain starts thinking, okay, it's fine now, it's good, we can survive this, because we're not just surviving anymore. Another little trick that I've learned that doesn't work in competition but works super well in free flying, if you're in mountains somewhere and the conditions are feeling a little bit iffy, then just go in and top land somewhere, sit for 5 minutes, look at it and take off again, and suddenly it is a completely different air mass that you fly in. I am not going to try to explain why that is. I don't know what happens there, but something definitely happens. I think what happens is the mind just gets wound up more and more and more, and it gets more and more scary. And then when we top land, because top landing is often quite difficult and we have to time it quite well and we have to be quite precise and do something quite difficult. So first of all, we take our minds off the scary bit, because now we're doing something. We have an objective. I want to land right there. So we have this objective and we come in and land there, and then sometimes you might not even have to get the wing down, or just let the wing fall down, relaunch, take off, and it's a completely different air mass flying. So that's another little tip that you might consider. Be careful with it. A friend of mine broke his ribs relaunching.
Max, det som du sa förut, det blir bättre längre fram, det är bra också.
Ja, just det.
Man är ju faktiskt på väg någonstans.
Ja.
Om det är väldigt jobbigt just där, så vet man att
det blir bättre.
Här ute blir bättre.
Ja. That's the reasons why, for someone like me, I struggled quite a bit in the late 90s with apprehension levels or with fear, basically. And if I was free flying, it didn't really work for me. But as soon as I had a task, then I could fly for as long as it took. So the next trick that I'm going to reveal to you here is to make tasks for yourself. Even if there is no task, no official task, you just make one and then fly it and actually continue flying it, because it only works if you're committed to doing it. It doesn't work if you bail out at the first sign of trouble and go back and land. But then you, in any case, that doesn't work, because then you didn't learn anything that day, and you didn't push your own boundaries either. So it's important to be a little bit disciplined about it. You make a task, you commit to flying the task, and then you fly the task. And that is the best practice that we can have at all. And it's something that I really think that even if we have no competition ambitions at all, we should still do that, because the thing is that paragliding is quite dangerous basically. But all of us in here in this room have decided that we want to do it anyway, because it's rewarding, it's good fun, and it's something that we want to do with our lives. So if we have made that decision, then we owe it to ourselves to become the best pilots that we possibly can. And we can only become the best possible pilots if we practice. And practice doesn't just mean taking off and thinking, ooh, this is scary, and then go and land. That's not practice. That's the opposite of practice. That's negative reinforcement of the negative feelings that we have. So in order to practice, we must actually go out and do it and get on with it. Only doing that can we become good enough that we can reduce the risk involved with what we do. Please note that nobody is more aware than me that no matter how good we become and how much we train, there's still residual risk involved. There's still a risk for even the best pilot in the world. He may still crash and hurt himself. Sorry. And that means, this is a little bit of a detour now, but that means that it's something that I find it important that you discuss with your surroundings, with your family, with your dear ones. I'm doing this paragliding shit. It's pretty stupid, it's pretty scary, and it's pretty dangerous, but I get a lot out of it, and it's important to me, and I want to keep doing it. And then they have better basis for trying to understand what it is that you do. And that's important to me, that you take that home from here tonight, that you think about what would the consequences be if I have a crash to those around me. Would they feel super betrayed and depressed that I hadn't told them, or would they understand a little bit of what I was doing and that it was worth it to me? And I've seen a fair few people, I've known a fair few people die in this sport, and it always feels really bad, but it feels better when it's someone that I know has had that discussion with their dear ones before. And that doesn't mean that our families understand, because nobody who doesn't do it can really understand, but they have a better possibility for trying to understand a little bit, or at least accepting that we're pretty stupid, all of us, if we've had that discussion beforehand. Remember that. Yeah, so those 5-10 people who could actually win the competition, they were the ones who actually thought that they were going to win. I've got some great examples of that. There's 3 Swiss and a Swedish one, and the Swedish one we've already talked about. But the 3 Swedish ones, no, the Swiss ones were Hausi Bollinger in the 90s. He just thought, of course I'm going to win, because I'm the best. So how could anyone else ever win? And then he did win. Now the reason is not quite as simple as it sounds there, because he had the best wing as well, and that helps a lot. So if you think that you're going to win and you have the best wing, then you're already 2 steps above the rest. The next one I can think about is another Swiss person, and that was Alex Hofer. Alex he's a farmer's son from some little valley somewhere in the back of Switzerland there. And he's a very intelligent person, but he's not a super sophisticated thinker. He's quite a basic sort of yes, no, on, off binary character. And I think that helped him a lot in his competition career, because he never really thought about the possibility that some of the others might be good enough to win or anything like that. For him it was obvious that he'd been training, and he was from Switzerland, and he was 2 meters and 20 tall, and he was the greatest paraglider ever, and of course he was going to win, and then he did win. And he didn't actually have the best wing at all. He had a normal wing when he started doing that. So he's the one, him and Peter are the ones that for me stand as the greatest pilots. Because the next one that I'm going to mention is obviously Friedel Maurer. He's also a fairly unsophisticated thinker from a valley somewhere in Switzerland. But he did have the best wing, and he had the best wing by far. And that helped him a lot, obviously. It's not to say that he wasn't a great pilot or that he isn't a great pilot, because he is and he was. But having the best wing just makes it much easier to believe that you're going to be the winner than just having the same as everybody else and still winning. So, and another one that's a really good example was this American pilot that some of you may have heard of, that was Scotty Marion. He didn't have anything in terms of equipment advantage. He had exactly the same wing as everybody else, but he just, well, he was religious. That was the funny thing about him. Maybe the wrong expression, there might be some religious people in here. But he believed that God wanted him to win. And that leads to the next interesting insight here, is that if you have a mentor or someone who you really believe in, someone you really look up to, who believes in you, and who actually trusts what you do and trusts you to be very good at what you do, then you're already 4 steps ahead of all the others. And now Scotty, he had the ultimate mentor because he had God on his side. But we can do with less.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
About Alex Hofer.
Yes.
He was supposed to attend to the Red Bull Cross Alps in 2011.
Yes.
But he didn't go there because he was injured.
Yeah.
So did he recover, or because I haven't read anything about him?
He's recovered, yeah, but he's not interested in it.
Is that fine?
Yeah. He's wave surfing now. Yeah. It's all what you get your kicks out of. Once you've won everything that's worth winning, then I can see how it can be difficult to come back and still find the motivation. And I think that's what happened.